it almost feels like it's unnatural for you to look after yourself. And your body is guiding you to the path of looking after yourself. More damage on various levels, and it's actually preventing them from losing weight. It's making them gain the weight that they're actually trying to lose.
For far too long, menopause has been shrouded in misconception, often viewed as an endpoint or a series of unwelcome symptoms. So, what if this pivotal life stage isn't a decline, but rather a powerful invitation for transformation? Today, we're going to explore how shifting our perspective can unlock an incredible new chapter of power and purpose. Welcome to the Harun Rabbani podcast, and we have our regular VIP guest, Nelia FREITAS. Nelia, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Harun. Glad to be back. It's really nice to be here to be able to talk to you about this really important topic.
Your work frames menopause as a sacred transition. Can you elaborate on what that means to you and how it differs from the conventional view of menopause as a medical condition or problem to be fixed?
That's the point. Menopause isn't a problem to be fixed. It is a natural physiological change in a woman's body, and it may take 10 years, 20 years. It'll vary from woman to woman. And there are specific physiological symptoms associated with the menopause, which are some are detectable. Clearly, the woman will feel these symptoms for themselves, and they will notice the changes gradually and as they go along in many cases. In some cases, some of those changes are very sudden, and the focus on menopause has been predominantly on those physical aspects, on the physical manifestations of those symptoms. What I am proposing and what I am suggesting in the information that we're covering today is that it is also an invitation for us to look at menopause as a spiritual transition, part of our journey, a spirit having a human experience. It's really coming from that perspective of the changes that our body is triggering is also a change in terms of where we are in our life path on a deeper level, that true self, that soul journey. What is the body telling us we need to do during this phase of life? And this can go right back to when your perimenopause begins.
You highlight 5 habits rooted in misinformation that totally hold women back during menopause. Can you briefly touch upon these habits and why you believe they're so prevalent?
5 habits are undernourishment, overdoing cardio and skipping strength training, ignoring sleep and recovery, clinging on to old habits, and self-abandonment in the name of others.
So let's delve into that first habit you mentioned, undernourishment, why eating less is not the answer. Many women are told to eat less and exercise more, cardio and whatever other exercise. What's the science insight behind why this approach is counterproductive? And what role does protein play for someone, particularly during menopause and perimenopause?
Well, the interesting thing that there's a lot of new research coming out now, although there's not a lot of it. The research that's coming out now is showing that women going through menopause need more protein. And so, therefore, they need to eat more to be able to get the protein. But we're talking also healthy fats and healthy carbs. And what a lot of women are doing is they're skipping all their meal, their breakfast, for example. They're not eating all that well when they are eating. And then they're deplete by the end of the day. And so a lot of it is geared on women eating the way they used to eat when they were in their 20s or 30s, or they're eating based on weight research that was done for young men, for example, or for men's metabolism. And what this new research is, I pretty much highlighted, is that women's metabolism and the way that hormones work in a women's body is very different to how it works in a man's body. And so, in order to be able to counteract what's called the oxidative stress tissues that women have more of than men do, yeah, this is going to cause issues then if women stress hormones are highest in the morning. And so physiologically, they peak at about 8 o'clock in the morning or from the moment that they wake up right through the day. And so they start to decline in early to late evening, which is around the time that most women are starting to eat more, from midday. So if you're then going into a fast, intermittent fasting does not work for women at all. The research has shown it's, in fact, so ineffective that it's causing them physiological harm, and they're more likely to put on weight than lose weight as a result of that, because they're putting their bodies into stress mode by fasting and not eating or depriving themselves of food.
Wow, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And this is a thing for me. Despite all the good intentions, the science just does not work when you're looking at, it's almost like you're looking at two different types of species. No wonder women gain weight so much. Oxidative stress, of course, chronic stress, release of cortisol, high levels of that, which is the stressor hormone, is associated with weight gain as well. It's totally mind blowing. And I have to say, we must do an entire episode just on that, by the way. That's not a topic we can just leave, but we will leave it for the moment. So, regarding overdoing cardio and skipping strength training, you mentioned that strength training is the most effective tool for preserving and even rebuilding lean muscle and maintaining bone health during this transition. So, why is this crucial for women in menopause and perimenopause? And what are the risks of chronic cardio?
So I'll touch on the chronic cardio or overdoing cardio first, because that's the quickest response. And that is, when women overdo cardio, they are putting their bodies into a stressful situation. So they're in fact increasing the stress hormones in their body, which is causing more damage on various levels, and it's actually preventing them from losing weight. It's making them gain the weight that they're actually trying to lose. This is why overdoing cardio during menopause ain't going to work anymore. Might have worked when they were in their 20s, possibly in their 30s, but once you hit perimenopause and estrogen levels start to fluctuate, progesterone levels start to fluctuate, that kind of exercise is not going to work anymore. So this is where strength training becomes more useful, because as the estrogen levels fluctuate and change, estrogen is really important for maintaining bone health and muscle health. And because it starts to fluctuate during perimenopause, okay, that's when it actually starts, it means that we need to maintain the strength in the muscles so that we don't lose that mobility that we have. So really, women in their perimenopause need to start thinking about doing their strength training early, so that when they get into their 50s and their 60s, they're not getting all the aches and pains that are associated with movement. I mean, we're not looking at becoming weight training experts or like muscular women for competition. This is just for basic health maintenance. Yeah. So if we keep the muscles strong whilst we're going through the estrogen fluctuations, then it will help reduce the effect and the impact of muscle aches and pains and joints later on in life.
You shared with me this amazing PDF, Menopause: A Sacred Transition. And by the way, if you're listening or you're watching, go to the description and you can click on the link and download it. Nelia's giving that away to you as well as to me. In that particular PDF, in that document, Nelia, you said something very important. Sleep seems to be a significant challenge for many. One of your points you make is is all about ignoring sleep and recovery. States that rest is not a reward for productivity, it is a sacred act of trust. Amazing language. Can you explain the hormonal shifts that impact circadian rhythm during menopause and how poor sleep can worsen metabolism and increase weight gain?
Everything's connected to these hormones fluctuating during this phase in time. And really, what our bodies are telling us as we are transitioning into this phase, that we really need to rest and we really need to recover. But what a lot of women do, because they're very busy, they're looking after their families, they are still working full-time employment, they're looking after everybody else. It may be that they're also looking after elderly parents or elderly relatives who are in a not the best state of health and they need the support. So, and sometimes they call them the sandwich generation, don't they? Where they still have children at home and they're looking after their elderly parents. So then the habit of looking after their own sleep, and then sometimes even that ideal that rest is associated with being lazy or laziness. That is a bad habit. It's also a misbelief. It is not one that's going to help them going forward. So the ideal is to not ignore sleep, not shorten, because sometimes society tries to project that really productive people only need for women who are trying to progress in their careers or progress in their businesses take this on board and then start to, during their menopause years or even perimenopause, yes, it's just starting to get all of these symptoms. Anxiety being one of them starts to go through the roof. Depression may also follow suit. Brain fog, things like concentration levels being really short. And so they start to wonder what's happening to them. And it's a combination of things. But on a spiritual level, our bodies are saying, actually, we need the rest. We need to recover. I put to you then, what is it that's preventing you from giving you what your body needs, the rest and recovery? So, on a spiritual level, your body is actually saying, it's not saying don't do any of these things or stop being active and a productive member of society. What it is saying is some things need to start shifting and changing because your body is shifting and changing.
It's interesting that a lot of research is already out there, which shows that people who are shift workers, that they work night shifts, have a significant increase in the chances of developing various cardiovascular diseases, including heart attacks. And I recently lost someone, a family member, who's only in his 40s and shift worker, young, healthy looking guy, gone overnight. Also, it increases the risk of metabolic diseases like diabetes. So this is a very serious, serious subject to consider. So in your section, in your PDF, you talk about clinging to old patterns when the familiar stops working. So this discusses how women often try to fix midlife symptoms by doubling down on past habits, the ones that are not working. What are some of these common old patterns and why don't they serve women in this new phase of their life?
So, some of these old patterns, again, touch on some of the topics that I've covered, but they revert back to drinking at the end of the night, the end of a stressful day, sat for long periods of time without moving their body. So if they are working in an office, for example, and their job is very sedentary in nature, then not doing the movement, or breaking it up so that you can put a little bit of movement into your body, but also to go out and get fresh air, being indoors for long periods of time, not going out into nature. And so old habits where you're focused on looking after other people, your job, perhaps even some of the meals that you're preparing. So if you're eating those types of food that you were eating in your 20s and 30s in the same way, and you haven't changed your meal plans, you haven't changed when you eat, perhaps you're eating all times of the day and that never made a difference, and all of a sudden, and you were eating healthy food. Let's say, give some women credit. Maybe they have been eating healthy all their lives and they're eating really nutritious, healthy food, but they're eating at various times of the day. Or even if they are sticking to a schedule and suddenly they hit menopause, they're starting to notice, oh, they're gaining a bit of weight. Where's that coming from? They've been eating healthy all their lives, or they've been active all their lives, but perhaps those habits, those meals that they were having in their 20s and their 30s are no longer effective for their menopause years. So in later on in their life, they need to change. And sometimes it may be as simple as increasing the protein intake and reducing the carb or the high starchy vegetable intake. And it could be like just subtle changes like that, which can make a difference. A lot of women, one of the old habits, cut out fat, zero fat, zero this, that, and just no fat, cutting out fat completely out of a diet. By the time you hit menopause, your brain, your body is going to let you know that doesn't work anymore.
Wow. So much going on. How do you keep up, right? This is why they turn to you. For anybody who is interested in learning more about how to work with Nelia to help you, because this is a complex subject, of course, and everybody is an individual. What is it that you do with your menopause clients? And I think you're the menopause mentor, right? Is that what you call yourself?
I am a holistic health coach with a focus on menopause, and I have a YouTube channel called the Menopause Minute. So, for those of you who don't have a lot of time to be researching stuff, there's little tidbits of information on that channel there to help you. I also am the holistic menopause mentor. How I help my clients is from a very tailored angle in terms of looking at their health, where they are currently. I always work with them from a state of where they are now and where they want to go, and bring in the various aspects. So we do nutritional deficiency assessments, we look at where their health is at the moment, and then we look at ways of guiding them to where they want to go.
Fabulous. So you mentioned the concept of self-abandonment in others. That kind of resonates deeply. It sounds a bit like martyr syndrome. You're putting your life aside, yourself aside for everybody else. So you state that self-abandonment doesn't just exhaust your energy, it disconnects you from your soul's voice. How does chronic stress, especially from self-abandonment, specifically impact women's health during menopause?
So that whole concept of self-abandonment's a very spiritual concept, because as you focus on looking after everyone else, it may be that while you're perimenopausal, you still have that responsibility of looking after your children, and then bring on the added responsibility of looking after elderly parents or elderly relatives. As your children age, obviously, and become more independent, you might have that empty nest syndrome coming in. And then you look for other things or other people to look after, because it almost feels like it's unnatural for you to look after yourself. And your body is guiding you to the path of looking after yourself, actually taking steps to say rest and self care are important. And before you can go and look after others, you need to fill your cup first. And so, on a spiritual level, you're being guided by your own body to focus on your own self care and to make that a priority so that you can fill your cup first. So then, when you go out into the world to look after others, you're coming from a place of being full within.
So throughout your materials that you shared on this PDF, there's a strong emphasis on spiritual truths and ask yourself prompts. How do you integrate these spiritual and reflective practices with scientific insights and practical recommendations you offer?
So the approach that I have, it comes from an understanding that there is a multidimensional aspect to the human being. We can't look at recovering physical symptoms without tapping into the emotional repercussions of those physical symptoms. And of course, a lot of people kind of stop there. They look at what is physical causing the emotional. Yeah, weight gain can distress a lot of women and make them feel lesser within themselves, and so on and so forth. What is not being considered is on a spiritual level, our bodies are actually giving us all the signs that we need to grow and to embrace the changes that come with the menopause years. We forget, we switch off, or we ignore the signs as we move and transition through the phase of menopause and even perimenopause. And so once we start to embrace that, and I do this with my clients, as we start to embrace all aspects of the self, this is why I like to ask the questions and give them an opportunity to reflect, because the journey at the end of the day is theirs and only theirs. I am only a guide taking them through that journey that I have been through myself and I am going through myself.
One of the big issues, I do have this big issue of people seeing the human body or anything in the world as a monodimensional, monochrome being where people just look at the physiological and totally ignore the emotional, or they look at the emotional and don't consider the scientific. And the whole concept, for those of you who don't understand as yet, the listeners and viewers, of course, there is no separation between your mind, your emotions, your body, spirit. Spirit isn't some old guy with a beard sitting on a cloud, by the way. You are energy, you are a spiritual being. So thank you for sharing that very important element, that there are multifaceted approaches that need to be taken. And hence, this is why it's called holistic. So if somebody poo poos holistic, don't walk away from them, run away from them, because they're being very naive and short sighted. I can promise you. So you mentioned recovery focused movement. And I know you're a movement expert, and you talk about low intensity recovery movement. What does this look like in practice, and why is it particularly beneficial for women in this phase of their lives?
With my background in yoga, I help construct movement practices that are achievable and something that can be done on a daily basis. And it can help with recovery, it can help with bringing the person back to themselves as well, because I incorporate breathing practices with the yoga movement. And breath work's very important to help manage the stress hormones that are going quite high in the body, as we know during this phase. With declining estrogen levels, yeah, the cortisol levels go up, the stressor hormones go up, and those oxidative stress tissues have nothing to sort of counteract those feelings within the body. So doing something like yoga, like going for walks in nature, like perhaps taking a bath, or even doing other forms of movement like Tai Chi or Pilates, because some people might be or qigong might be more interested in doing these sorts of movements. At the end of the day, they're all very similar in the sense that it is very slow and mindful. And the whole point of that is that it triggers the relaxation response in the nervous system.
This makes me think of when I go to a sauna, and I've talked about saunas so many times on my channel and various other places. It's so good for you. However, a lot of people get confused. They think the sauna, especially when you're doing it 80 to 90 degrees Celsius, is relaxing. No, it's not meant to relax you. It's meant to activate your immune system. So it will raise your cortisol level. So I'm just wondering, you may or may not know the answer for this, if this is useful for somebody going through menopause. I'm thinking not based on what.
Actually, they've got recent research now because it seems counterintuitive, right? Women who have one of the common symptoms in menopause is hot flashes or night sweats. But there is recent research now that shows that using a sauna can help reduce the vasomotor symptoms that women experience during menopause. Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, right? Hot flashes. Oh my God, I'm feeling too hot. The last place you want to be is in a sauna. But actually, there is now research to show that what the body goes through when it's in a sauna counteracts the physiological symptoms of the hot sweats and nights or hot flushes.
Actually, that makes sense to me. I'll tell you why. Until today, at the time of recording, the average temperature in the UK has been late 20s, 33, 34, and it's British heat, by the way. That means it's humid, sticky, and unbearable. And because I use the sauna regularly, I found it that my body was less anxious. So there was less stress. And so that does make sense. However, one of the issues, though, which is of concern, is I've tried all sorts of yoga. And as you know, I've enjoyed your classes more than anybody else's. I've enjoyed a couple of other classes. But I think the emphasis is on doing the more relaxing form of yoga, not the one that's going to stress the crap out of your body. But let's move on. We won't go into that too much. For women who feel they're running on fumes or struggling with some of these deeply ingrained habits, what's one, just one immediate actionable step they can take to begin shifting towards a more supportive and more soulful approach to menopause?
So, one thing that they can do right now on their own is to make sure that they're actually getting enough sleep. That would be right at the top of the list. Because what I find with a lot of busy women is that they're not getting enough sleep. They're limiting themselves and they're constantly in the phase of doing and then not resting enough. Part of it is that when they do finally get to sleep, they're also not getting that deep sleep and they're not giving themselves that deep sleep. So that's one thing. The next is to make sure they're hydrating regularly. A lot of women forget to drink enough water throughout the day, and they need that to also get a good night's sleep.
And also remember, don't forget to add the pink Himalayan salts and a bit of lime juice because it does make a difference. Otherwise, you're going to
Yeah,
be going
yeah.
to
Celtic
pee.
Celtic salt is another one as well, full of minerals, Himalayan, so long as they're not using the white, overly processed table salt. Any of the natural salts would be good. It helps them to absorb the water into their cells, and so they're not having to wake up in the middle of the night and go for a pee all the time. But the next one is to also look at the protein intake, look at ways of increasing the protein intake. The research and the guidance is that if they can manage to get a minimum of 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal, and this is where plans and having breakfast, don't skip breakfast. That is key moment in the day for women going through menopause to actually get some protein in. And it may be that they do it via a protein shake, for example, and get a really good high quality protein powder that they can throw their coffee into it, some ice cubes, especially with the heat that we're getting right now.
You're listening or watching the Harun Rabbani podcast with myself, Harun Rabbani, and Nelia FREITAS. I only ask for one habit, and you get three for the price of one. So thank you for sharing the three, despite me asking you one, because we've got a couple of very important questions to ask you, Nelia. You share a powerful personal journey navigating menopause, burnout, and raising a child all alone without any support. How has your experience shaped your holistic approach and your understanding of what women truly need during this transition?
I've learned from my own personal experience that I was going through perimenopause and wasn't aware of it at the time. As a result, I took a lot of different steps to build my own understanding of true self, spiritual healing, and all of that. So that came in at the time that I was raising my son on my own, working, and knowing that even though I was doing the yoga at the time, there was more that I wanted to do and learn. And of course, leading a healthy lifestyle has always been part of what I do. And even though I was eating a lot of healthy food, I noticed that as I was transitioning into my later years, with my menopause, that my body was changing in ways that, perhaps not in a dramatic, in a drastic way, but it was still changing. And I realized that by embracing those changes and really looking at those changes as signs from my own body guiding me in my path is a way that I can transfer some of that knowledge, some of that experience to guide other women who may not be getting the guidance and perhaps not have realized, like myself, that a lot of our own life path can be beautifully and intricately connected to what our soul is guiding us to do. And so that, therefore, yeah, hence I've written this paper.
It's very interesting and reinforces the whole concept that there's no one prescription or one diagnosis. There's no cookie cut formula for anyone. And as you mentioned, physically healthy, mentally healthy, nutritionally healthy, and everything seems to be right. But you didn't really have any guide per se to give you this all rounded approach. And, I guess this is why others are blessed because of your collected wisdom that you can share with them. This is lived experience, of course. Now, your mission is to help women move from survival mode to soulful alignment. Love that. What does soulful alignment mean for our listeners? I think I know what it means, but in the context of menopause, and what's the ultimate outcome you hope women achieve through your guidance?
Soulful alignment for me is about really tuning in to what the soul's saying, and our body communicates with us. Yep, all these little symptoms, all these little niggles, our body is communicating, and the soul is there also guiding us. The thing that I'd like to hone in for women is that there's a lot of societal beliefs that have been ingrained into women about retaining their youthful appearance, retaining their youthfulness throughout their entire lives. So women are restlessly trying to maintain their youthful appearance, their youthful way of being, and trying to still remain the 20, 30-year olds that they no longer physically really are. And soulful alignment is about accepting who you are, where you are, being comfortable in your own skin at the phase of life that you're at, and not trying to be some past version of yourself, but to embrace wholeheartedly the current version of who you are, and therefore who you are becoming, because who you are becoming is more powerful than who you were 10, 15, 20 years ago.
That is so powerful, and it's a powerful ending to this particular episode. And for anyone who wants to download Nelia's write up, her PDF, it's called Menopause, A Sacred Transition, Understanding the Real Habits That Hold Women Back and the Spiritual Power of Change. Nelia, is there any final comments you want to make? Anything maybe I should have asked and I didn't ask you, but please go ahead.
No, you've asked some really good questions, and I'm very grateful to you having this platform to be able to share this. But just one last comment to your audience, all the women out there, just bring compassion into everything that you do for yourself. And that is the most important, that is key. It is to view self with true love. And by doing that, it comes back to you. It comes back to you.
Beautiful ending. And by the way, to my young mentees, because I've got a lot of mentees of all sorts of ages, from one end of the spectrum of the age or the journey to the very young, start the compassion thing now. Don't wait until you hit the menopause. Practice it now, because that in itself is a habit. Nelia Freitas, thank you very much for joining the Harun Rabbani podcast, and hopefully you will join us again very soon. Thank you, audience. Make sure you share, comment, listen, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.